Well, on Tuesday, the 6th of May, and I'm sorry if this YouTube blog has arrived really late. I've been so busy. But on the 6th of May, I was back over at the Croydon's Voluntary Action Centre for another open forum meeting provided by the Croydon's Mental Health Service User Group, which are titled Hear Us. Now, Hear Us Croydon is Croydon's mental health service user group, which acts as a coordinating body to facilitate and ensure service users' involvement in the planning, delivery and monitoring of mental health services in Croydon, helping to improve the quality of the services commissioned and delivered in Croydon's objectives. Now, they hold monthly meetings to inform people of mental health developments in Croydon. Well, this month's guests, being May, we had presenters Peter from Mind in Croydon, and we had Sarah Mines from the Untapped Theatre Company, Dr. Constantina Papalias from the Institute of Psychiatry, Georgina Boone, who is the pharmacist over at the Royal Bethlehem Hospital, Dr. Joseph Rodriguez, and dietitian specialist Deborah Thompson. As the event started, we had Jane White speak on house rules, that being mobiles kept on silent or turned off, plus to respect the guest speakers. As you may know, that quite a few mental health meetings or forums can be quite heated because obviously service users or those recovering or mental health survivors can sometimes be angry. We can all be angry on having to take medication or deal with services that might not meet our requirements. But the important thing is that the guest speakers, although they may represent the services, they're not to blame for everything on those services, and they've come down kindly to educate us on the Croydon's Hear Us Open Forum. Another thing Jane mentioned was to actually fill in the forms at the probably at the start of the meeting or at the end of the meeting. So this basically helps with Hear Us funding for those meetings and helps them provide lunch, and lastly to let them also know what to discuss, and they will try and get those guest speakers in, so it's not to the point where they're dictating what we would like to hear. They'll always ask for ideas, so that way we're involved. The first guest speaker to speak was Peter from Croydon Mind, and Peter spoke about how the Stop Smoking service has been launched. Plus, this service is being run in conjunction with Croydon Council, but the one that Mind in Croydon is running is specifically designed for people with mental health problems. Peter also talked about the Positive Steps walk that is taking place on the 24th of May 2014, and I've got to admit this blog's probably just come a bit too late. If you wanted to join now, or if you're listening at a later date, then that's past. Mind in Croydon were also, Peter spoke about how they were running a cycling group on the 22nd of May, usually for 2 hours Thursday morning, and I believe bikes and helmets were provided, and the cycling will be around the South Norwood Park, which is I think about a 2-mile circuit. Someone actually asked a question about the Positive Steps, and I think this is their second Positive Steps event, and they asked, how far is the walk for Positive Steps, and plus do we actually have to raise any money? And Peter replied that it's not really any need to raise money, but there is a registration fee of £5. The main aim of Positive Steps is to raise awareness. Next up to speak was Sarah Mines from the Untapped Theatre Group, and Sarah spoke about how people came along to write about their experiences, and also she mentioned that she even spoke on Croydon radio about these experiences, about how people were experiencing mental health. The theatre group came about in order to help share mental health with the rest of the world. And Sarah feels it's the differences, the way people think, speak and move. And she feels mental health is a vulnerability which we all have. And this group will be a safe and secure environment for those to participate in. And they usually meet around at the Edge, 1:30 on Sundays, and I believe that's a place over in Croydon. The plays that they probably produce or going to produce will probably be like Cinderella X Factor play and the Fair X Tale. But again, we had some good questions from the audience, and one was worried that if you haven't got any acting skills, can you really get involved in the project? And Sarah replied, yes, of course you can get involved. You could be involved as set designers, creative arts, could help with customers, be involved in the technical crew like sound or lighting. Another person asked, how long can you be required to commit to a project like this? And Sarah replied that the first performance will be held in November 2014. However, come down anyway, at least enough for your role to be filled in for the rehearsals. And she mentioned that they will teach you skills, so it's actually worth your time. Now Jane White, who usually holds these meetings over at the Hear Us Croydon, reminded people that there will be an open meeting, a special well-being event in July, because they've got their funding for that, and lots of things will be going on, and this will take place, I think it's on the 1st of July, around about 1 o'clock. Next up to speak was Dr. Constantina, and Dr. Constantina is actually a service user researcher. She was a service user herself, and she's a researcher from the Institute of Psychiatry, known as the IOP, and that's over in Denmark Hill. And she was talking about service evaluation that they are doing, and they would like service users to be involved and be compensated for their involvement. And she actually asked the audience, how many of you here have been involved in research? She actually felt that there's actually lots of opportunities for service users or those who use the services of mental health services to that those within those mental health services do not often find out about them, and they are trying to actually link these projects in order for service users to actually find out about research opportunities. This evaluation is mainly to be involved in psychosis research, so it's not involved in eating disorders or any other mental health problems. As mentioned earlier on, service users will probably get around about £15 for their time being compensated. And Constantine reminded us that if you see a doctor or nurse, ask them about research opportunities, and also reflect on how does it feel when you ask them, and what does it feel like when they respond, because this will help in her research. However, the main topic for the open meeting was on medication, and to speak about this was the SLAM's pharmacist Georgina Boone and Dr. Joseph Rodriguez. And you might remember Georgina from one of the SWEET videos, SWEET standing for Service User Involvement in Training and Education, that I actually had produced earlier on, I think around 2013. And that was actually produced over at the Cares event in Croydon Mind. Well, anyway, Georgina spoke about what can pharmacists do to help when it comes to medication. And Georgina helps run a patient groups on SLAM wards. SLAM stands for South London and Maudsley. And at these groups they talk about medications, options and other things as well involved in medication. Georgina mentioned that we all have seen pharmacists and chemists, but there's a difference in the ones that are usually at the shops than the ones that actually work on the wards in the hospital. And the ones on the wards know a lot more on medication and what people are actually on. And first, she talked about what the side effects are on medication and who to speak to. Like, if you're taking medication and you're concerned with side effects, you're more likely, obviously, to speak to the ward pharmacists or speak to your consultant psychiatrist or doctor, even a nurse on the wards, or even friends or family. They may notice things that you might not notice when you're taking medication. However, everyone reacts differently to some medication. Biologically, we're all different, and it also depends on the diagnosis. Still, it's always important to get good feedback. It's also always good as a reminder to speak to the professionals. Don't try and test or come off medication just like that, because you may risk yourself relapsing. And if you are an inpatient in Islam, you will usually have a pharmacist assigned to your ward, so feel free to speak to them. Community teams, if you are not an inpatient anymore, or if you are in the communities, can also help answer questions about side effects. Usually that will probably be perhaps a care coordinator. Oh, it's not just the medication alone in aiding in recovery. As I mentioned before, service users need support, be it from family, friends or carer support to aid in recovery. Social service support can aid diet and exercise, and we'll get onto that one later, and psychiatric support and more. Still, pharmacists or chemists should be able to signpost you for such support anyway. And medication, as we all should know, is also the cornerstone for a lot of people who are suffering mental health problems. Now, Georgina went through quite a lot of slides. One of the most important was what happens if you ran out of medication, and Georgina showed a slide on who to contact. However, clozapine is not so easy to get if that runs out. You would actually have to go to Croydon A&E or King's A&E, King's being King's College Hospital, which is off Denmark Hill. And there are liaison teams that are there to assist with medication. And this might not always be the case if you're watching this perhaps in 2015, 2016. I try to keep the information as up to date as I can, but this was done in 2014. She then talked about the common types of medications used to treat mental illness in the UK, and these being antipsychotics, which aids in treating and trying to prevent psychosis. Another cluster of medication used to aid in recovering from mental health is antidepressants, and they're to treat moderate to severe depression. Others are anti-anxiety medication, helping to aid in recovery from anxiety. Then we have hypnotics or sleeping tablets, used to treat insomnia or sleep problems. Mood stabilizers, the next lot, which treat and prevent mood fluctuations. Georgina then covered each of these groups in detail. First, she talked about the antipsychotics, and we had two rows, one on the left side, which is the older set, the ones that were introduced first, hence perhaps earlier on in the perhaps from the 50s upwards, 1950s, 1960s onwards, and the right hand side being the newer medication. The left hand side list had different side effects to the right. However, clozapine seems to be the better, although you may need blood tests, which can be intrusive They must look closely at the side effects and how they are affecting you. Some side effects can be very dangerous when it comes to mental health tablets or medication or drugs. Now, someone in the audience mentioned about quetiapine and felt that it made him want to sleep all the time, and he feels that the consultant that they're having won't change the medication. And the pharmacist actually agreed this can be a problem, and she agreed on the side effects of that particular medication, although she can actually comment on individual cases, but felt that it was best that that person speaks to a carer or the care coordinator, or in an event, take someone along with them to help discuss with your doctor about the problems you're experiencing with the medication. Someone else mentioned that one of the side effects that they were having was the problem with salivation. Their the saliva actually caused them to be having dry mouth, or again they would be tired. Plus they also noticed that they tend to put on a lot of weight as well. And Georgina felt this was actually quite a good observation, quite a good question to ask at this open forum. And this is perhaps why one of the main other events was the dietitian, who I'll get on to in a moment, about what she was describing, how diet is also an important part for quite a few medications out on the market, because some do increase weight gain. Another good question was on quetiapine, which is another medication used to try and combat mental health difficulties. And this one, so I mentioned, seemed to give them an appetite, but also seemed to block thoughts and ideas. And again, they feel just too tired to leave the house. They feel terrible, and it feels that it's just knocking them out. And the pharmacist mentioned that it could help if dosage was changed. It could go up or down in volume, but again, they're advised to speak to the care coordinator or their consultant psychiatrist. The next section of the presentation was on antidepressants, and although this was not a full list, they come in different groups, and again, some of them probably have different side effects. Now, the one on the left side of that column can tend to make you feel quite drowsy and having dry mouth. Ones on the right don't usually cause so much drowsiness. Again, we had quite a few questions. Someone asked if they can request consultant psychiatrists to come to their appointments when it comes to medication dosages or receiving medication. Another question was that the person was on another medication. I think it was called paroxetine, and they were on that for about 10 years. And they changed to dalphamine, which they mentioned that it gave them bad cramps, and they wished that they could actually take those pills out the amount of pills that they were taking, because it was affecting them so much. And Katrina felt that it was actually hard to know where the side effects are coming from if you're using a multitude of medication. Some service users use more than one medication. Now, if you're starting out on new medication, you might actually be deceived where the effects are coming from. It's not always the case. She wanted to have a brief chat with the person who raised that question about the bad cramps and problems of the other side effects that they were having. But she also mentioned that it was to be aware that there can be so many changes, but it's not a good idea to avoid coming off of medication because you might not like it. Some side effects may actually wear off after a few weeks. Someone asked about tremors, and that being, I think it might be uncontrolled movements, and wondered if there are any medications that can actually help with it rather than just coming off of medications, they would prefer something that they could also take in order to combat those side effects. And Georgina did say that there are actually medications that can help with side effects rather than just coming off the prescribed medication to deal with mental health difficulties. Another service user spoke about constipation, and he found most medication that he had used that actually caused dry mouth, caused him to be drowsy and constipation difficulties. But he also mentioned that, again, sometimes it's actually up to the service user not to move into quick lifestyle changes. A good question that was also raised at the open meeting was on quetiapine, another medication, and they felt that it affects their liver function, and they wondered how did they move to another drug without risking relapse. And Regina felt that this again was a good question, and basically they should actually check your liver function each year. If there is a problem, then basically what they should do is look at the dosage or level and maybe change that dosage or even change to another medication. Now, they do not know too much about all side effects, but monitoring is one of the best ways to combat this. Another person stated that the medication people take, sometimes you have to give it a chance to settle in. If you just again come off medication too quickly because you don't like the side effects, sometimes you're at risk of relapse if you suddenly stop. Georgina then produced a slide on more information shown on websites about medication. Now, after a quick break, there was a Q&A session, and again there were very good questions. And here they were. That basically the first was on what do you do when a service user lies when taking medication, and that being on lifestyle problems, especially on, as I mentioned, alcohol or other things that might interfere with the medication that they are prescribed in order to help them combat mental health difficulties. Another question was basically that someone felt that what do they do if they feel that if they're not getting any support from the care coordinator or the consultant psychiatrist when it comes to medication. And the panel replied that support can be from mental health advocates, mental health organizations like Mind or Sane and so on. And I actually asked a question on depot, which basically is medication that's given to someone through injection, which means that it cuts out someone having to take pills or tablets each day. But the problem with this is that it's difficult to actually take that type of medication at a set time, especially if someone was suffering the side effects of sleepiness. They could perhaps take that more at night. With depot you can't do that. So I actually asked the question, this can't really be changed or taken at certain times, or what can you do? And they mentioned that sometimes it's down to the dosage levels, but again they can't really comment on individual cases, and it's usually can be down to the service user or someone who's on that form of medication to raise this with the consultant psychiatrist or their care coordinator. Another person mentioned that changing medication can cause withdrawal symptoms, and the panel stated it's best to weigh up again the lifestyle changes. Some mentioned that they had this side effect where they were experiencing pops in their head, and is this something that they should be worried about? And the panel mentioned that there are certain side effects. However, some can be stress related. It may actually be something physical. Someone else said that they had a similar situation with other medication, that being Prozac, and it made them feel terrible. So they quickly actually came off, went on another medication, and they tend to be sensitive to any medication, even though those, on those they have other complications that they have to take medication for those as well. So they're taking medication upon other medication in order to combat the side effects. Lastly, during that Q&A panel session, so I'm warned that when they come off meds, it gave them a lot of difficulties, and the best way to come off medication is very slowly, so you're not hit by terrible withdrawal problems or risk relapsing. After a quick break and some networking, we had the dietitian present to us about healthy diets, and I mentioned that it's very important to look at one's diet when perhaps if you're prescribed medication to deal with mental health problems, because as some may know, some medications can add to weight gain problems. So the dietitian, Deborah Thompson, was speaking about nutrition and healthy eating. The core of the presentation was on how can we be more aware of our diet when on medication, and she posed a question off one of the slides on basically what do you understand of the Eat Well plate. And after a pause, not many people replied because they weren't sure or they'd never really heard of the Eat Well plate. And I mentioned to Deborah that it is a start on explaining a healthy diet. However, some information from the Department of Health can be confusing. Plus, again, the price one pays in order to incorporate healthy food into their diet isn't always agreeable when it comes to purchasing healthy food. And she replied that it's true, it can be confusing. So I still agree with what I've mentioned, although Deborah stated that she has some extra information that can inform us on basically what we can eat and dealing with buying things at a lower rate, buying foods when you have a low income. Now, Deborah then explained more about the Eat Well plate, which we all were happy to hear. She then moved on to why it is recommended to eat 5 a day, because again, some people can be confused by what 5 a day is. Some pondered about energy drinks. However, the dietitian warned to avoid energy drinks, at least the maximum amount being 5 is being too much. It's almost the same amount of 3 or perhaps 4 cups of coffee, high in energy, high in sugar. Deborah kindly talked about healthy eating on a low budget, which is one of the questions I raised. And she spoke about planning meals in advance to avoid buying on impulse, trying to buy tin food or frozen options, avoiding buying pre-packaged meals, like fish or other meals, and avoid buying basically takeouts because they can be pricey, and again they're high in salt, high in sugar, and it's difficult to lose that weight, especially when you're fighting weight that is put on by prescribed medication. Now, as a warning, not all medication causes weight gain, but there is some out there that do. So again, this is the reason why Deborah was invited to speak at this open meeting. Another person talked about how they were diabetic and on a restricted diet, and how some of the diets and some of the foods that are mentioned of that presentation might not be of some use to them. However, Deborah talked about glycemic index and how it looks at how quickly foods are broken down by the body. Still, you do need to have carbohydrates at probably around at each meal, but it actually depends on your activities. Now, Deborah was critical about certain supplements that state that you could lose weight if you take them, especially if they were perhaps a tablet or drink. She felt it's just basically to avoid them. Quite often, some will actually interact with the medication you're on, and she believed that if it was true that they could help you lose weight, then we'd all be really taking them. In some sense, we'd all not have weight difficulties. She also mentioned that it wasn't now 5 a day, it's now 7 or 6, but when you're feeling low or depressed, then it's best not to try and eat some, because I think she was actually trying to relate this to comfort eating. She also mentioned that we should try and follow the Mediterranean countries or Japanese food, because they seem to live longer eating those types of foods. In fact, the problem is in Western societies, we are usually on such bad diets just basically due to lifestyle choices. I mean, we work longer hours, and sometimes we tend to depend on convenience food, and all this does add up. At the end of the day, society does pay a high price for eating convenience foods. Deborah, the dietitian, then talked about bread, rice and pasta options, and which should be one of the main parts of any diet, and these foods actually provide our bodies with energy. She then asked the audience how do they manage their cravings, and one of them stated that they used to eat a lot of chocolate. I'm very bad with this. I have a sweet tooth, or more than one sweet tooth. I tend to find it difficult to walk past a shop without going in and buying chocolate myself. But anyway, this person had some luck. They ended up moving on to eat yogurt, and the dietitian agreed and mentioned that we should try and eat low energy, low sugar intake foods. Now, at the open meeting, time was running rather short, so Deborah left at that. But I felt that many who attended the open meeting did learn quite a bit, and I hoped that doing this video blog I could pass on some of the information that I picked up at the open event, or open meeting. However, before that meeting ended, we finished with a song that was sung from someone who attended that open meeting, and she just really wanted to entertain us before we all left. And this time I actually recorded her voice. I don't know if you've watched the mental health event. This was the same person who wanted to sing there, and she did, but I didn't record it. And since this open forum does sometimes give people a chance to express themselves, especially if they're going through a tough time, here is the song that she was singing.
You're talking to me, babe, and I know it's you. It's you, making me high. Yes, it's you, it's you. And I don't know why. Does it feel that you feel dirty? And I don't know it's true, no it's true. Talking about yourself. It's you, ooh, 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 ah. It's you, ooh, ooh, ooh. Thank you very much. The next time I'm going to sing now, it's called...
So okay, might not make it to the #1 spot of the record charts, but I felt being there, she was sharing something with us, and reminded us that even though some people are actually living on the edge, there are still some ways to express ourselves, or express themselves, to forget our problems. But I hope this audio or YouTube blog has been informative for you, and I hope if you're around perhaps in Croydon, you can pop down to these open meetings, and they're usually held once a month, every first Tuesday of each month. You're welcome to attend, especially if you are interested in mental health or service user yourself.